You need to answer those key questions, which is where are you now? Where are you trying to go? And how are you going to get there? Just articulating that and communicating that to your team. If you can start doing that, you're going to drive the right discussions.
Welcome to the Team Amplifier Podcast. I'm your host, Byron Summerdahl. Here you'll be inspired by industry leaders who build flourishing tech teams. Stay tuned and prepare to be amplified.
3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, we are here with Klaas Ardinois. Klaas is a technology strategy consultant and happens to be a New England Patriots fan too. So now if you're not a fan of New England Patriots, you should still stick around because today we're going to be talking about teaching our tech teams about business strategy in order to help them flourish. And I'm really excited about this conversation because it's very aligned with how I also feel about what the kind of respect that we should give to our teams, the kind of expectations we can have for our teams, that to stretch them to things outside of the box, but enough respect to share this with our team and trust them that they will use it to drive their purpose. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Klaas, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and where you're at these days?
Sure. Where I'm at is pretty easy. I live in London in the UK right now. The New England Patriots connection is entirely based off the fact that I spent quite a bit of time in New England in my mid-20s. And so I picked up the vibe right when they were at their peak. It's a little less fun being a fan these days, but we'll roll with it. Besides watching football, I've spent the last decade as a CTO in anything from the early stage startups, the two guys in the garage stereotypes, through to VC fund and Series A, merged and acquired and sold and been sold. Ended up running as CTO for a public company for a while. And so in that journey, there's very few things you can throw at me that I haven't seen before. And more recently, I've turned all that experience into a strategy consultant role where I now typically engage with CEOs and CTOs and try to bridge that gap between them.
So in all of this experience that you've had, I can tell that you have been an avid reader all this time. And really, I think any tech leader that's worth their salt either needs to be reading constantly or really, really needs to get on the ball and be reading, because there's a world of knowledge out there that we can glean from each other and others as we are trying to grow and improve as tech leaders. So Klaas, can you tell me about a book that you've been reading lately that after I gave this big intro, I really hope you've got a book in mind.
Yeah, and it's going to be like a really disappointing thing. But before I jump into this specific book, I think what you read matters, particularly as you grow in that technology career. And I would encourage anyone who's listening or watching this eventually, pick up a book that's outside your comfort zone. Read technology books. Don't read about whatever, OpenAI or Claude or Transformers, none of that. Read books that are not your wheelhouse. And so if you had to pick up one, I picked up Good Profit recently by Charles Koch from the Koch Industries Group, a massive private company in the US, fingers in everything from oil to real estate to you name it, they've got a finger in the pie somewhere. But it really made me think about some of the core concepts in that book. It's the idea that fundamentally they talk about what is good profit. Right? Like, is there such a thing as bad profit? Is there bringing this back to this idea that good profit is profit that you derive from adding value to a consumer, and you're adding more value compared to the alternatives they've had, and you do it by consuming fewer resources. So if you can do something that adds value, ideally more than someone else, and you can do it for a less cost of input, that is good profit in their world. And then they kind of lay out their way of achieving that and how they think about it throughout the entire company. And so it really makes you think about, somewhere in there, there's a technology company who does really, really deep algorithmic oil trading stuff. But it surfaces through this whole idea of actually, we care about having a strong vision. We care about setting a strong direction. We care about not just the talent we bring in, but also the principles they bring to the organization. We want to align our team around core values as much as skill. And then they talk about how they set incentives for people and how they can push decision making down the organization and give people freedom to decide, knowing that they have people with the right sort of motivation and the right attitude. So it's made me think a lot about what we do.
That's great. I think that book could be a really, really beneficial book for almost any tech leader. So we'll make sure that the link is in the show notes so people can get out there and download that book, buy it, and learn some more. It's, as you were saying, good profit, bad profit. I started thinking about blood money, and that's probably not the exact same thing, but it is a really, really useful idea to go after profit that is there because it's bringing real value. And like, this whole podcast is about human flourishing, and I'm also thinking about like profit that leads somehow to human flourishing. I like that concept a lot.
Yeah, and I think particularly in that book, it's worth zooming in on the chapters where they talk about the kind of people they hire and why they hire for. I think they were one of the pioneers actually of hiring. So probably some editor here, but they were one of the pioneers of hiring for attitude and hiring for principles and sort of morals almost, just as much as hiring for pure raw skill and talent.
Yeah. So Klaas, I think you've paid your dues already in life, or you might still have some dues to pay. I think we all probably do, since we're all constantly improving. But I like to, at this point in the show, I like to remind everybody that's listening that we are all human beings. We are all still learning and growing. And so Klaas, at this moment, I would like for you to step into my confession booth and tell us about an embarrassing mistake that you've made as a tech leader.
I'll give you the headline and then I'll get into some of the details. But the headline is, at one point in my life, I wiped France off the map.
Wait a minute. So France, like the country.
The country, yes.
But that's, okay, your last name is Ardinois. That's French. So
yes.
Wait, so you erased your country of heritage off the map?
Somewhat. So I was actually born in Belgium, but we shared history or animosity depending on which part of the country you're from with France. But actually what happened was in my time at the map making division of TomTom, I was involved in producing the final output of that map. And I mean, we're talking big data before big data had a real name. That's the sort of thinking and process we were in. That company had one of the first Google Street Maps internally. We run our own Google Street Map. But in that long processing of gathering all that data, mapping all the roads and putting the points of interest on, at some point it gets baked back down on a CD. And in that baking process, I may inadvertently have forgotten that France existed.
Nobody needs to drive through France anyway.
Again, you can get the wine delivered, so why would you have to go there?
Yeah. So at what point did they find out?
We found out quite late. The CD wasn't fully baked, but we found out quite late in the process that, it was such an obvious thing that it wasn't going to go through unnoticed. Like the QC would pick up that all of France was missing.
Well, yeah, especially if they're like testing it personally. Like, I'm just driving through Europe and I get to France and I'm lost. So if you lost all of your QC people in the process, that you never found them again, then that's a failed test, I think.
The big giveaway was file sizes. Turns out that France missing was a huge drop in overall size of the European packet.
Makes sense.
Like, okay, so what's missing? It's like, oh yeah, hang on, all the FR data sets, that's probably someone forgot the config. This guy.
That's awesome. I wonder if I can segue masterfully from that story into our theme for the show, which is business strategy. Yeah, probably. Like, we, as a business, we hope to sell this in France, and we kind of need to teach Klaas a little bit more about business strategy so that he won't delete France.
I mean, strategically, if you're a map maker, having France feels like such a low level requirement. I'm not sure any strategy would ever explicitly have to address you need France on the map.
Yeah. So tell me then, Klaas, joking aside, what does teaching our tech teams about business strategy have to do with human flourishing?
Well, I think before we dive into the sort of the meat and potatoes of this whole episode, let's take a step back and then define business strategy, because I think one of the issues that I've certainly seen working with my clients is that strategy has about 1 million definitions, and some of them are way better than others. But over the years, I think I've settled on something that kind of makes sense for most people. I think one of the core elements of strategy is that you're making a bet on an uncertain future, on an uncertain outcome. But if the answer is no, it's not a strategic choice. And in that unknown future, you're making a bet with something of value today. And the thing of value has to be significant. So if you're sort of a mid-level engineering manager, your entire value is constrained by the people reporting to you typically. So if you're willing to bet the majority of those people on a particular activity or direction, that would be a strategic choice for you. Go up to the most senior levels, talk about CEOs and boards, clearly the scope or the size of what they're betting is a lot bigger. But it still falls on that same principle. There's an uncertain outcome, and you're willing to risk a kind of a substantial amount of your resources on that you're making. That's sort of the sort of core of the decision you're making. And then from there, you're going to have to make a set of coherent decisions to make that happen. And those coherent decisions, the real hard part is steering the entire organization to make sure those coherent decisions all point in the same direction. And that's where the flourishing comes in, because if you get it right, you get a whole bunch of people who generally pull in the same direction, understand the goals they're going for, see that result. And most people feel pretty good about being right in the decision they've made. If you flip the coin and you went heads and it falls on heads, you're happy.
So I'm wondering, I mean, because it seems like a no-brainer. Like, we're not talking about teaching people like giving people an MBA. Like, we don't need a bunch of developers, QA engineers, and DevOps engineers. We don't need everybody to have an MBA. That would be kind of interesting. They might get in each other's way if they actually did have all MBAs or advanced business training. So we're not really talking about like giving them that advanced business training. We're talking about something else. What do you think, like, what's the amount of business strategy that we're trying to bake into people?
And as someone who has an MBA, please don't all get an MBA.
Yeah.
It is anyway, we can sideline the discussion about MBAs and where they are and are not valuable. But I think the key piece that people should take away here is that no matter what level you're on, you have a strategic input or a strategic backdrop behind you that should inform your decisions. And so whatever you're developing in terms of your knowledge, however you want to be trained, it's about understanding your relation to that strategy. And so any good strategy or a way of framing this is what I go through with leaders. And it's answering some really, really simple questions. When it starts with, define where you are today. Where are you? How did you get there? What context, what set of decisions got you to where you are today? And that's sort of part one of your strategy. Part two is, where are you going? Now, where do you want to be? What does good look like in that sense? And then from there, I'm here now. I want to go to that thing over there. What choices or what priorities or which kind of elements do we think will help us get there? And then you could apply those sort of 4 or 5 questions to any level, all the way from your CEO down to your DevOps team.
So what are the things that, like, practically we'll use a software development project as an example. What are some things that are practically affected from decisions that are informed by a team that has this business strategy in mind?
So the classic case is this sort of cascade, right? At the very top, C-level, we're going after cost optimization, whatever. And there's a million ways of doing that. You could start by laying off half the staff. You could cancel half your Slack, whatever. Or you could do the sort of more strategic approach. You go, me as the CTO, how do I get my guys aligned, my teams aligned to think about saving money along the way? How do I drive my architects to factor in the cost of their decision as they go through their architecture reviews, and how do they then push that down for the individual engineers so that everyone knows when I make a decision, I should think about the cost. And so, a really practical example, I did this at one of my teams, where I just went, look, we're going to build a model of our AWS cost. So we're just going to take the last 6 months of our AWS bill. We're going to look at it literally line by line, all the way from the high ticket items to the things that cost us a few pennies. We're going to track how that behaved over the last 6 months. Did it go up? Did it go down? Did it stay flat? Is it reserved capacity? Is it on demand? And for the things that change a lot, what drives that change? In this case, it was all about users. So more users drove certain changes in our bill. And so we agreed that our RDS costs, they're fixed. Right. Until we hit a certain level of users, RDS is fixed. So there is now a cost question on RDS. If that goes up or down, why did that happen? How did that happen? If we make a change to our software, what's the impact? And so I drove that entire cost thinking down to the engineers who went, hey, we're thinking about doing serverless, doing Lambdas. And the discussion quickly ended in the engineers actually coming back with a conference page that went, here's our cost analysis. It turns out Lambdas only make sense as long as we stay below this level of requests. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to ask the question. I didn't have to think about this. But the information that bubbled up just came with the costs analysis with it. And so that's one of the examples of like, how do you push strategy down? Because most engineers would just go, Lambdas were cool, let's go do it. But because the backdrop that I've set for that team saying, hey, costs matters, we want to do this, the architect started asking the question. You create that kind of habit at the lower levels to just have that reflex to go, hey, hang on, Klaas keeps asking about this cost. Why don't we just think about it before we ask him?
So I think that business strategy can actually have an impact even on your engineering practices too. Like if the team is aware that as a business, we're trying to make sure that this software is constantly open to new features. We don't want this software to ever get to a point of rigidity where it's rejecting new features or extensions or changes. We want to be able to innovate quickly. We want to be able to move nimbly through the market, respond to the market quickly and easily over time. If the developers, for example, know if that's a part of their strategy, if that's a part of their goals, then they may bubble up some decisions back to the product owner so that the leadership team can help them to say, yes, it's okay to, I don't know, use more design patterns or more solid principles or more unit testing or more pair programming, things like that. But if they don't know about what the strategy is, where this product is trying to go long term, then they might assume that they're just supposed to go fast and they're just supposed to duct tape everything together because that's how a lot of teams operate, you know?
And I think it's one of those key things for leaders to realize. It's not just having a strategy. It's communicating it day in, day out. Like even if you had the perfect strategy, if you forget to tell people about it, it won't have an impact. And I like to duct tape example. Quite often when I'm dealing with sort of earlier stage companies that are in that, rush forward mode, one of the key items or the key points in my strategy that I put right up there is there will be duct tape. I just want to know where it is. That it's okay to use duct tape. It's fine to hack stuff in some way together. But please, let's just all admit that that's what we're doing rather than pretending they are sort of robust solutions that will stand the test of time. And there are going to be points where we have a massive argument about that should never be duct tape. But that's the whole point of having the conversation.
Right. I personally, before I learned about business strategy, I used to think that any use of duct tape at any point was nearly immoral. Like I was firmly in the camp of Uncle Bob, and great thought leader. And I still to this day love his content and his books. But in my earlier years, when I had no idea anything about business strategy, I would assume that every project had to be to the letter of what Uncle Bob said had to be. So I felt like it would be an immoral choice, an unethical choice on my part to not do everything with test-driven development 100%.
Yeah.
And there were actually some projects. I can think of one especially where I and fellow developers, we kind of went rogue and we were not paying attention to the business strategy. And the business strategy for that product, the strategy was we need to get to the market first. It didn't matter the state of the product once we get there. And so duct tape would have been perfectly fine. And yes, it would have been nice to have kind of documented where is this duct tape and this chewing gum, but they didn't care. We were the only ones that cared. And so it was a friction-filled experience the entire time. We were constantly fighting against the leadership. Leadership wasn't informed enough about what we were doing to speak well enough to what we were doing and tell us, hey, this is why you need to lay aside all of your religious principles and start, can you just use some duct tape? We weren't aware. And now I can look back at that and I can repent. I can say, hey, that was for me an embarrassing mistake. But it's because we didn't have a clue about the strategy of what we were really shooting for and what the business wanted in the first place.
And I think it goes back to my point about, read books that are outside your comfort zone. Hands up, right? I think I own 5 or 6 copies of Clean Architecture.
Yeah.
Most of them I've given away over the years and then bought it again and then lent it. It's absolutely phenomenal, really good stuff. But if you go and apply it everywhere, you end up exactly in the position you're describing, where this wasn't the thing that had to stand the test of time. This had to be ready at a certain point, and then beyond that, it could fall over. I remember I was the engineering manager at The Sun here in London, one of the major newspapers, around the London Olympics. And so there was an incredibly hard deadline because the Olympics weren't going to move if we weren't ready. So we went like, hey, this isn't about delivering the world's bestest, brightest, most efficient, elegant software. This is about, on the opening ceremony, dealing with several millions of people hitting this webpage. As long as we can withstand that, we'll deal with everything else.
Yep. So as tech leaders, as we are trying to integrate business strategy more into our teams, and we start to teach them about business strategy and about our particular business's strategy, what do you think those tech leaders might overlook as they're starting to get into this?
So I think the first thing that people miss is the distinction between strategy and operational efficiency. And people often mistake operational efficiency for strategy because for any number of reasons, we've all been told to do more with less and hit our quarterly numbers or half yearly or make sure we hit the budgets. And so we've been forced to be very tactical and very operational. And it's challenging to step away from that and stand up to typically your boss who has the same incentives coming down to him to go, hang on, that is just tactics. That has nothing to do with strategy. Are we doing the right thing here for the business in the long run? Do we have a thesis of what we should be doing? Do we have a goal of where we're going? And so the first thing is almost kind of become a consultant to your own business to some extent. Take a step outside and go look at, how does this business make money? What sort of really big decisions are we making? And as a tech leader, it's hard to just miss that because you're so caught up in, but my team needs to release XYZ feature in the next 3 weeks. So strategically, I'm going to push the team harder. Right? Like there is a zero strategy in that decision. I think how you get around that is just training that strategy muscle everywhere you go. back when I was a consultant, we used to play a game between myself and the local director of the Belgian division. Just any shop from your garage to your car fix to a tire change to the sandwich shop for lunch. We simply just used to play a game of estimating out the business. Right, we see this many people here, we see those ingredients or that much, we see this many cars come by in the garage and the tire costs about that much. How do these guys make money? What decision do they need to make more money? And that is just a muscle you can constantly exercise no matter where you go.
So can you share a time when teaching your team about business strategy had some unexpected outcomes?
Yeah. So we can actually talk about, good examples, bad examples, and then how that kind of shifts people's thinking. Because, again, the backdrop that we're looking at here is, unless you're at the very top, you're typically not setting the overall strategy. You're just taking what is there and kind of looking at your own world and the strategic implication there, and how the people sort of below you in the organization, how their decisions would feed into that. And so, to give you a really bad example, a company I worked with had for a very long time decided to pick fast and cheap out of that fast, cheap, and good triangle. And so inevitably the result was that as the software became older and aged and matured, it developed incredible levels of technical debt in a variety of ways, from poor code to ill-supported infrastructure to people with knowledge having left and no one really taking that over. And so there were some elements where no one would dare to go because it works, and if you touch it, it probably falls over, so let's not. And so that strategic choice at the very top had just led to a number of wrong decisions. Because actually, weirdly, it's an example of the strategy not kind of taking input from the bottom, where the engineers were all screaming about, like, hey, some of this stuff is really bad. But at the top just stays blind to that because it doesn't bubble up. You have a disconnect. So I think that's one of those takeaways if you're at that sort of middle layer of the organization. It's not just about taking what you're given. It's also about being able to frame your feedback into the strategy. It would have been relatively straightforward for an experienced engineer to make the argument, like, hey, if we keep doing this in 3 years' time, our pace of developing and sort of moving forward is going to slow down because no one's going to do this. It's going to become a rickety platform, XYZ. And then at least you have a choice to make as a leader. So that was an example of kind of how it goes off the rails sometimes. And equally, I've dealt with teams in a much more inspiring way, where they were in that sort of run fast, move forward, break things quickly mode. And we introduced a framework that helped them just make decisions in a slightly more commercial way, which started with top level, the goals for the company over the next 12 months. And this is a startup, so they weren't funded for much more than that anyway. But over the next 12 months, we will need to raise more money. For us to raise more money, we need to show traction. Traction is defined by at least a couple customers who are paying for our base version, a couple trials, and one lighthouse big-ass account that will kind of carry us forward and roll us through the organization. Those are the goals. From there, that means, and that's what I sat down with technology guys, and then from there, that means with technology, we don't need to design yet for millions of users. We need to design for 5 users. Very different game, very different decisions. Right? We don't need to worry yet about rules-based onboarding, but we do need to get out of the mode where onboarding means every time we try one, we have a bug and we need to fix something. So we need to find stability, but not UX. Right? And so just following that cascade down led to a number of really sensible choices where every engineer knows we currently prefer A over B. Go make your decisions that light.
Yeah, so in that case, business strategy can actually, like being aware of where your business is trying to go, can actually influence how you prioritize your cards on your Kanban board. Instead of just going with the login screen as the first card, that comes across your board, maybe you prioritize another back-end system that just handles things from a spreadsheet. I can see how that becomes very far-reaching once the team really understands where the company is trying to go from a strategy perspective.
Yeah, and I can remember having a discussion with the team where they basically went like, we know we have an issue in our ability to have throughput through our like, complicated system, queuing left, right, and center. But one of the queues was going to become a bottleneck. And so there was a genuine discussion about, do we fix this now? Do we fix this tomorrow? Is this the most important issue? And so we overlaid this with, okay, realistically, we should expect 5 users. That's fine. That'll do this for another 9 months. Let's address it in 6.
Yeah, that's big. That's incredible. In fact, you just like sparked some new ideas of conversations I need to have with my team, like tomorrow, about some things. Like there have been a few times when my own team would start working down, start going down a rabbit trail, and I try to rein them back in and get them going in the direction that I want them to go. But I understand that's a rabbit trail. That's wasteful development at that moment because I have the strategy deeply ingrained within me, and they don't. If I were able to transmit the strategy to them in a way that it really helps them to integrate that into their thought processes, then maybe they wouldn't go down the rabbit trail in the first place.
And that was the interesting part to be observing that team. It wasn't the CEO or me or anyone else going to the team going, you can't go chase this. It was the team just realizing themselves that, hey, if we're dealing with 5 users, this will be fine. We should go spend our time and effort on something that really makes the user stick. So we raise the money so the business actually survives for another 12 months after that.
So I already know what I'm going to do tomorrow with my own team, and it's going to help me flourish and them flourish at the same time. But let's hear from you, Klaas. What is something that you think tech leaders should do tomorrow to improve team flourishing? What would that be?
So I would start by writing down your strategy. And that sounds really hard and difficult. Shouldn't be more than 2 pages, most likely. But you need to answer those key questions, which is where are you now? Where are you trying to go? And how are you going to get there? And how are you going to get there is really framing so we prefer these kind of things over those kind of things right now. Hey, I know there's going to be duct tape, but I do want to know where it is. But hey, duct tape's okay. And for some project, it might be the exact opposite of, hey, this needs to be rock solid. This is the core system. Don't get it wrong. But just articulating that and communicating that to your team. If you can start doing that, you're going to drive the right discussions.
Man, Klaas, what a great conversation. I can already tell this is going to make waves for a lot of people. It already has for me. So I really appreciate this conversation. It's almost like a really, really effective coaching session. So I guess the check's in the mail. Klaas, thank you for coaching me through this.
Happy to.
So how can people contact you or get closer to you, Klaas?
The easiest way is generally just hit me up on LinkedIn. And I'm fairly responsive on there. So if you connect with me or send me a message, that's the easiest way. And then whether that's coaching or you want to have, a beer if you're in London, both good.
Awesome. Okay. I guess I'll have to send you a beer then.
I can do.
Klaas, thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome. Great conversation. And I hope to do this again sometime.
It sounds good. Thank you for having me.
This has been another episode of the Team Amplifier podcast. Thanks for joining us. Now, get out there and be a team amplifier.